We've been married for a few years, but we still don't have any children. My wife wanted to have kids, and we were considering fertility treatments when I turned 30. One day, I approached my wife to talk to her. "Honey, I have something to tell you."
I have something to tell you too.
Her voice sounded cheerful. I knew that what she had to say would not be bad news. I thought so, and I encouraged her to go on. I asked, "What's your story?"
Ken, don't be surprised. Actually, I'm pregnant.
"What?" I was so shocked that I couldn't find the words.
Come on, give me some reaction. Oh, maybe you're too happy to speak. Haha.
She looked happy, stroking her flat belly and telling me about the test she took at the hospital. The baby wasn't mine, she seemed to think of it as ours, so I decided to go along with it for now. We lived together, and it was probably easier for me to act as a father anyway. Time flew by since we found out about her pregnancy. I was supposed to be the father, so I needed to support her. Seeing Marie's belly grow day by day in echo photos, I couldn't help being amazed how human was born. It's inevitable to think that it would be even more fun and exciting if it were my own child. Then, on the afternoon of the due date, Marie started having contractions.
Ouch, it hurts. Hurry, call a cab.
Got it. Hang in there, honey. I comforted her while calling for a labor cab. It was our first childbirth, and we're both nervous. Yet, a part of me remained strangely calm, noting that contractions really came on the due day. After we arrived at the hospital, she continued to suffer from shortening intervals of contractions. I encouraged her and called relatives whenever I saw an opportunity. After a while, Marie entered the delivery room. Shortly thereafter, a man approached me in the lobby.
"Ken, I came to see the baby."
"Yeah, thanks." The man was my best friend. We had been family friends for a long time, and I wanted him to see my newborn baby.
"Where's the baby?"
"He's not born yet. Just went into the delivery room a while ago."
"Didn't you say he was born on the phone?"
I meant to say he was about to be born, but I might have misspoken in the rush. I tried to brush it off, but in fact, I had told him on the phone that the baby had been born. "Right. Since you're here, why don't you join me in the delivery room?"
"Me?"
Despite his protests, I half-forced my reluctant friend and took him into the delivery room. Marie, sitting on the delivery table, noticed our presence and looked at me.
"Wait, what?"
Seeing my friend next to me, Marie was visibly unsettled. However, with the labor pains, which were getting worse and worse, she could no longer care about us. Marie's delivery went smoothly with no particular problems. The only unusual thing might have been that during her labor, the hand I was holding onto was my friend's. I really wanted him to watch it, so I held his hand tightly not to make him feel uncomfortable and leave the room. After the baby was safely born, Michelle and I left the delivery room. And my parents and Marie's parents were there. They tried to talk to me, but when they saw Michelle next to me, they looked at me strangely.
Oh, Michelle.
"Hey, you're here too." "Yes. Ken called me to come and see the baby, but when I came, he said the baby wasn't born yet."
Oh dear, this boy. He's such a careless boy.
My parents, who had known my friend for a long time, chuckled at his story. I briefly introduced him to Marie's parents as my best friend. After a while, a nurse came out into the lobby with the baby.
He's a sweet little boy. Please hold him.
The nurse looked at me smiling.
Come on, Ken. Daddy has to hold him first.
With that prompt from my mom, the relatives started urging me to hold the baby. I, too, thought that the father deserved to be the first one to hold the baby. So, I nudged my friend's back, who was standing beside me. "That's right, Dad."
What?
Michel was puzzled when I called him Dad. His eyes got shifty, sweat forming on his forehead. The relatives looked equally confused. "Come on, it's your baby. Hold him." With that, I signaled to the nurse to let my friend hold the baby. The nurse offered the baby to him, and he couldn't refuse, so he held the baby in his arms. How does it feel to hold your own child?
Huh? What are you talking about? This kid is yours. That's enough.
The sound of angry shouts drowned out the confused Michelle's voice. It was my dad.
You're the father, Ken. Don't joke around at a time like this. Your friend seems uncomfortable.
What are you talking about, Dad? I'm sure that his father is Michel. Right? My father frowned and he was about to shout, but he fell silent when he saw Michelle's expression. Michel, still holding the baby, looked visibly paler than before. An uncomfortable silence hung in the air as Marie entered the lobby in a wheelchair. Marie, in her wheelchair, looked tired, but soon seemed to realize that Michel was holding the baby. Sensing the abnormal atmosphere, she forced herself to act cheerful.
Thank you for holding the baby, Michel.
Her forced smile was painful to see. Despite that, since Marie was trying to change the mood, I made an effort to sound cheerful. Of course, it's your and Michel's baby. You have to hold him before anyone else. As I smiled, my wife's face turned pale. Even the nurse pushing Marie's wheelchair realized something was wrong with a shocked expression. The nurse who brought the baby over seemed to sense the gravity of the situation and asked to Marie,
You must be tired, ma'am. Please rest in your room.
With that, she instructed the nurse pushing the wheelchair to head to the room quickly. We silently followed her. The baby was taken to the NICU, escorted by a nurse. After moving to the hospital room and the nurse left, Marie spoke up.
Ken, why you said such terrible things? He is our precious baby, right? And yet, to say like that, it's awful.
Marie started crying on the bed. In the corner of the room, her parents were looking at her with concern. But in this chaotic situation, it seemed they couldn't intervene even if they wanted to. So you're not going to admit it. But I have proof. I opened my notebook to show her. Counting back from the due date, this is the day you conceived. As you can see, I was on an overseas business trip that week. It's odd to think you became pregnant while I wasn't even here, isn't it?
There's about a week's difference. Not every pregnancy is exactly 10 months and 10 days.
Marie immediately objected. Of course, this was to be expected. Well, that's true. How about this one then? I took a document out of my bag and handed it to her.
What?
Even after looking at it, my wife didn't seem to understand what the document was. It's the result of a zoospermia test.
What?
We couldn't have children for a long time, so I took a test. I thought maybe I was the reason you couldn't get pregnant. And they couldn't find any sperm in my semen.
No, that's not true, because I got pregnant.
Suddenly, my wife was told that I was sterile, and she was clearly upset. Her hands were shaking as she held the test results.
So, maybe you got sick after you got pregnant?
I waited for my wife's anguished retort, and produced another document. No, that's not true. That's the result from just before you got pregnant, and this is the result from when I retested after the pregnancy. On the day my wife told me about her pregnancy, what I wanted to talk about was this infertility issue. I had been struggling with how to tell her that the reason we couldn't have children was because of me. And just as I had gathered my courage to confess, she got pregnant. When you said you were pregnant, I wasn't speechless because I was happy. I was shocked and couldn't say anything. Seeing my wife so happy, I wondered if the test results were wrong. Then, without telling her about the azoospermia, I went back to another hospital for another test. But the results remained the same, confirming that I couldn't have children.
This is impossible. Maybe you were just unwell during the test.
I told the doctor too. But they told me it wouldn't naturally heal without surgery. At this point, she fell silent. Though our relatives were frozen in shock, I continued. If the baby isn't mine, I wondered whose child it was, so I looked into it. The credit agency was good enough to find out right away. I took an envelope out of my bag and tossed it lightly in front of Marie. She opened it with trepidation. It was evidence of my wife and best friend's affair. There were messages, hotel records, and even pictures of them meeting while she was pregnant.
Even if you show me this, it doesn't prove the child is Michelle's, does it?
Perhaps in defiance or desperation, Marie tried to justify. Ha! Then can you still say that with this? I pulled a voice recorder out of my pocket and pressed play.
Are you sure he's okay?
Don't worry, Ken doesn't notice it at all. He thinks it's his, and he was talking to him hard yesterday.
He's nice, but kind of clueless.
Let's raise him with Ken until he's around 1, then I'll divorce. After that, I'll marry you, the real father of my child.
Yeah, let's remarry and become a real family with blood ties.
The voice recorder played their conversation, plotting a plan where they would deceive me into raising their child, essentially a scheme for surrogate pregnancy. The air in the hospital room grows heavier with the unbelievable content. Marie's mother, unable to bear her daughter's foolishness, slumped to the floor. Marie and Michelle remained silent, their heads down, motionless. The voice recorder continued to play their conversation.
After the divorce, I'll get a share of the assets, and Ken will pay a lot of child support. And if he cheats during that time, we'll get even more in compensation.
Then, let's hire a breakup artist.
I stopped there and looked at Marie and Michelle alternately. Even now, do you still refuse to acknowledge that this is your child?
Ugh, ugh.
She started to cry again. I wonder what she is crying about. It's not something that can be forgiven by crying, disgraceful woman. What about you? I asked, this time to Michel. He remained silent, his eyes being shifty. He was so happy to talk about his real family in the recorded conversation before. When I asked him if he was the father, he just stopped talking. What a pathetic man. If you still won't admit it, shall we make it clear? I took out a DNA test kit from my bag. As I was putting the kit's parts together and putting on gloves, Michel noticed and ran away.
I'm outta here. Whoa.
He forcefully opened the door of the hospital room but immediately stopped in his tracks.
Oh, Dad.
The one who blocked his way was Michel's father. The reason why Michel's father suddenly appeared was because I'd called him. Given our long-standing family friendship, I had already disclosed everything to Michel's parents beforehand.
You stupid. Ouch.
Ben's harsh scold struck Michel. Known as a stubborn man through and through, he was famous for being a bad-tempered old man in the neighborhood. Michel was literally dragged back into the hospital room by the scruff of his neck. He got down on his knees and apologized to me and the rest of the family.
I deeply apologize for the outrageous behavior of my foolish son.
So sorry. My best friend had always been naughty, but I had no idea that he was such a despicable bastard that not only touched my wife but tricked me into raising his own son. I was angry and at the same time pitiful when I saw him get down on his knees. I kneeled down in front of Michel and made him look up at me.
What? Ha!
I grabbed him by the chin, and he stiffened up, as if he thought I was going to hit him. Stay still. Say, ah.
Ah.
I firmly held his chin to keep his mouth open and used the cotton swab from the DNA testing kit to collect cells from the inside of his cheek. Later, it turned out that Michel was the father of the child my wife gave birth to, after all. When I visited Michel's parents to tell them about the test results, he was there too. I was a little surprised because I had not been told that Michel would be there, but I soon found out why.
I'm sorry you had to come all the way out here, Ken. I know you don't want to see this guy's face, but I just brought him back. I'm sorry.
You brought him back. When I asked Ben what happened, he told me that he found out that Michel had quit his job and was now a NEET, so he was furious and brought him back to his parents' house. Living alone is out of the question in his current state. I was talking with his father, who was furious, but I knew that my best friend was a NEET too, according to the investigation by the detective agency. I didn't think that his parents didn't know about it, so I didn't report it to them. In fact, the reason why my wife planned the mendicancy scheme was because Michel was NET. Realizing he couldn't financially support a child in his current situation, she had chosen to raise the child as my own. She was an endlessly conniving woman. Although I had been taken advantage by these despicable individuals, but the only saving grace was that Michel's parents were very decent people. They apologized again and promised to make their stupid son take full responsibility. Not long after that, I divorced my wife. The marriage between Marie and T. Michel, who committed such despicable infidelity, couldn't be accepted by both families, and the child would be raised as a single mother. Although Marie lived with her parents, her life was likely not peaceful under the cold gaze of society. On the other hand, Michel worked tirelessly under his father's supervision day and night. All his earnings went towards child support and compensation. I received a substantial amount of compensation, and both families apologized to me profusely. However, no amount of money and apologies could change the shocking fact that I had been betrayed by my wife and best friend. I was hurt, and I was terribly exhausted both physically and mentally. In such a state, I thought I could be alone from now on, but I was lucky enough to meet a wonderful woman and remarried. My new wife is very understanding of my azoospermia and is really too good for me. She said she didn't mind not having children. However, in my original life plan, I had wanted my own children. With the money from the compensation, I made the decision to undergo surgery. And the surgery was a success, and thankfully, I was blessed with a child. According to his wife, the child's ears looked just like mine. Even such a small thing makes me happy and warms my heart. I will be happier and happier from now on.